What's going on, guys? In today's video I'll be going over how I turned this sketch into this sculpture, so let's get into it. Alright, so the first thing I did here was shape out the armature for the sculpture, and I didn't do a full armature. I just kind of started with the head and the neck, and then later on I started to add limbs and more pieces to the armature, but basically it was meant to be like a skeleton for me to add clay to. Here I am just shaping that out, and then I started adding in clay for the head, trying to make it as big as the sketch. That's why the sketch is right there. You also see me very quickly here poking in the eye sockets and the hole for the mouth, and kind of just like doing a lot of adding and subtracting with the clay. Adding in eyebrows, adding in some clay and detailing it to look like the mustache, poking a hole and sticking a little cigarette in there, which broke a million times, but I just kept putting it in there because I wanted to see it. Maybe you could say I was eager for the finished product, but it's whatever. It should have been a final step, but it ended up being an ongoing step. Next here I kind of gave him a little torso, and then I tried to like play with sanding him down just to see what that would result in, and I was like, alright, this is also a final step if need be. I don't need to be doing this now. Here I am just adding to the hat and just like adding on clay to build up his mask because he's still smaller. This is where I started to add more to the armature, like I mentioned before, trying to get his skeleton to match the sketch, or at least the trying to estimate how much clay I'm going to add to this aluminum foil, essentially taping it up with masking tape. And just like, I also wanted to see if I can make him stand before adding any clay. That was like a worry of mine, that he'd be wobbly. And the moment I got the skeleton to stand was a proud moment, that's for sure. Alright, so now that I have basically the rest of the armature of the body done, I start adding clay from the feet up, basically, and I'm just like packing it on here. And for this project I was using this this air dry Daz modeling clay, and it's like very squishy and wet, and it was definitely a lot harder to work with than the polymer clay sculpting that I see on YouTube, at least from various YouTubers. It's just that because it's so squishy and mushy, it's like hard to get even amounts of clay or like shapes to do what you want, when you're applying them to the figure. It's not like, where I would see somebody working with polymer clay, and if they cut a triangle and like pressed it onto the figure, it would look the same way. Whereas with this clay, it's like too much pressure and that thing is mushed in, and it's just kind of lumpy. It's like, even the finished product felt a little lumpy, but I guess it gave it this like handmade feel, which I wasn't mad at. And it was a learning experience that, I'll apply to future sculptures when I switch to other clays, like bakeable polymer clay and whatnot. But here you see I'm working on them shoes, man. Them sneakers that I gave him. I got the pants detailed, and I'm just trying to get the shoes right. And the shoes were definitely something that I constantly went back and added and subtracted from to try to make them look symmetrical, trying to get the soles right. And at one point it would look like he was leaning forward or leaning back or leaning to the side, so that was a challenge. And again, it's all because of this. I'd say, it's probably a combination of my inexperience in addition to this clay being a little mushy, but it is what it is. I got it to work at the end. And now I'm just like moving on up to the torso and the hoodie, packing on clay where I need to, trying to spread it out evenly and, you know, smooth it out with my finger. That was one thing that was, you know, good about this clay, is if you wet your finger, or whether you're wearing gloves or not, and you're just rubbing on the clay, it's an easy way to smooth it out. And I'm not sure if that is the same with polymer clay, but I'll find out when I use it, I guess. I know that clay is just way firmer, so I guess we'll see. But yeah, here we are. Let's get back into the video. So at this point I'm working on the hands, and boy were they challenging. Just like trying to make a round ball, and you know, figuring out if I should cut the fingers out of the ball or reattach the fingers. Again, I'm over here watching literally like polymer clay YouTube tutorials, trying to apply it to the clay that I'm using, and it is not working whatsoever. And it just became such a challenge, and you know, it was just a lot of trial and error, as you can see here. And I eventually figured out something where I just like cut them out, and you know, added a thumb, and then I just like let them dry. And here I'm like trying to use this other little device that I bought that's supposed to help me, you know, push out even amounts of clay, but again, it's not working because it's meant for polymer clay and not this mushy clay. And yeah, we're just trying to attach these hands, and it was a struggle, but eventually they stuck and we got them to work. Now it was time for yet another learning experience with this jetpack that I'm about to add to his back. And for whatever reason, I thought it would be a good idea to make a structure on its own, let it dry and harden, and then try to attach it to his back. And that didn't really work. So I'm back to the drawing board, and I'm like trying to create two even looking cylinders to stick to the back of him, and just to shape them out as, you know, this rugged, you know, scrap metal jetpack of his. And it was definitely a challenge. It was just a challenge to get it to be symmetrical, but then eventually I gave in to the imperfections, and I was cool with it looking like a scrap metal job of a jetpack. And, you know, if you look closely at it, you'll see what I mean. I really tried to give it this rugged feel and just kind of gave in to it not being symmetrical. So now we're in the home stretch. I'm doing some sand downs, I'm doing some touch-ups. I'm, you know, poking some deeper holes where they need to be. I'm about to reinstall the cigarette for the millionth time, and yeah, we're almost there. Time for the last piece to my beloved character Snow, the little fuzzy ball that pokes out of his hat. This was also a challenge, as much as every other part of this sculpture was a challenge. One, getting this, you know, ball of clay to stick to this aluminum wire, and then, you know, trying to poke a hole in the back of his head to stick this aluminum wire in was also a challenge, getting it to stick. Eventually, after so many tries, I actually ended up using super glue to just get it to stick in there, because clay wasn't doing the trick. I did that off camera, but in the clip here, you see I'm just reinforcing it with clay and trying my best there. In hindsight, should have gone with the super glue from the start. Didn't think of it at the time. Sometimes that's how it goes. And he's finished, at least for this first round, because you already know, if you follow me, I tried to make some silicone molds, and your boy broke a couple times in the molding attempts, which were a big flop, by the way. But again, learning experiences along with this entire project. This whole thing was a learning experience. I'm definitely hyped to do more sculptures of my original characters. And for those who didn't know, this is my original character, Snow. He is an animated Kupo bear toy who absorbed the imagination of his previous owner. Kupo bear toys are obviously a fictional children's toy / plaything from Onion City, the fictional setting that all of my characters inhabit. His owner was the last of the true indigo children, and his imagination was absorbed by Snow as he lost it over time. This is something to look out for just in general when with all my art pieces. I'm working on a comic on and off for probably over a year now, and more of this stuff would be explained in that comic if I could just finish it or get a release out, but we're all busy. You know how that goes. Anywho, thank you for tuning in. The next video will be me painting my character Snow. I'm really excited for that video. Currently working on that now. So I hope you look out for that. Stay tuned. Sub if you're new. Hit like if you like. Hate on me if you hate it. Show some love if you love it. Peace.